Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports with another football video, and today I'm going over my 2021 NFL Power Rankings for Week 18. I meant to do this video earlier yesterday, but I wasn't able to get to my computer because I was out on a vacation with my family. But I wanted to make sure to do it tonight. I decided to wait until after the Monday Night Football game because although I thought that this would be the outcome of the game, I just wanted to make sure that the video was if I'm gonna wait a day, then might as well wait until the end of the Monday Night Football game instead of doing it like 5 hours earlier. So yeah, sorry about the late upload, but I want to get right into it. First off, we start with the dumpster fire as always. We have the Jaguars, the Giants, the Panthers, and the Lions. The Giants just got demolished by the Bears, so they dropped a couple spots. The Jaguars stayed at 32. The Panthers dropped from 29 to 30 after their terrible loss. And the Lions are staying. Well, no, it wasn't a terrible loss by the Panthers. They played the Saints very well, but they did lose, and the Jets played a better game. And then the Lions dropped back into the dumpster fire at 29 after getting blown out by the Seahawks, who were on a losing streak. Potential for next year, we have the Texans, the Jets, the Seahawks, and Washington. Washington is at the top of this category because they have been the most consistently decent this season. The Texans and Jets are just barely starting to turn the gears late on in the year, and the Seahawks have been really up and down, mostly down. But this week was a little bit of a respite, even though they're playing the Lions with their backup quarterback. Washington has been the most consistently decent out of these teams, and even that hasn't really been enough to do a whole lot. They finished 6-10 with one game left, which isn't terrible, but I think a lot of people were hoping that they would be able to make the playoffs this year, maybe get the spot that the Eagles are currently in. But losing to the Eagles this week was rough, especially a divisional game towards the end of the season. The next category is they do this every year, and this includes the Falcons and the Bears. The Falcons and the Bears both finished just below 500, or they haven't finished yet, but the Falcons are 7-9, the Bears are 6-10. I keep saying finished because these are usually final season records, but there's an extra game this year. The Bears played really well towards the end of the season. They started off strong, they had a really bad drought, and then they started playing decent towards the end of the year. The Falcons were consistently decent the whole year. So both of these teams had a pretty okay year. I wanted to go through the bottom teams pretty snappy because the playoff teams are what people are more interested in. But yeah, both the Falcons and the Bears have had very solid seasons this year. And I think that both of them do have potential for next year. Matt Ryan always has potential, especially if you can get him some guys. So this year, he's been 7-9 for a few seasons in a row now, but he can step it up, maybe. And then the Bears, this was the first season with their new guy, and you're not always going to do your best your first year as a quarterback. Jalen Hurts played decently last year, but this year he's 9-7. He's had a really great season, and I think that they can do a bit next year, potentially, depending on how their offseason goes. At number 22, we have the Broncos. At 21, we have the Browns, and at 20, we have the Vikings. The Vikings had a really tough schedule this year, and they didn't do terribly with it. They didn't finish with the best record in the world. They probably weren't too amazed by it, but they did have a really hard schedule. They played the AFC North. They played their own division. They played the Cowboys. They played the third seed teams were actually fairly strong this year. And so, although the Vikings didn't finish with the best record in the league, they did have a very solid season. Kirk Cousins had another potentially playoff Pro Bowl performance, but he still wasn't able to get a Pro Bowl. And Dalvin Cook had a really good season as well. I think that their offense will continue to do well next year, and they just need to fix some pieces on defense, and they might be able to do well. The Browns had a really strong start to the season. They quickly fell off. And the reason why I have the Vikings ahead of the Browns currently is because the Vikings have been consistently decent the whole season, and the Browns recently got considerably worse. The Broncos have been another one of those weird teams where they'll win a lot of really really strong games against strong teams, and they'll also lose some really weird, bad games. They started off with 3 wins against 3 bad teams, and then they were consistently below average for the majority of the rest of the season. They were always staying in that fight, trying to keep their chances alive, but it was never just quite enough. The next category is they've had their moments. That includes the Saints, the Ravens, the Dolphins, and the Steelers. This is an extension of the last category, but these teams were a little bit more consistent. The Saints started off very strong, but they had a lot of injuries. Michael Thomas never played the entirety of the season. And I think that they had potential to maybe even make the playoffs, but their injuries and everything has hurt them. They might still make the playoffs. They did win this week, and they do have chances to get into that playoff spot. But unless the 49ers lose next week, it's not going to happen. And they can. The 49ers can lose next week. They're playing the Rams. So I think that the Saints could potentially get into a playoff spot. But with the injuries that they've had, I think that these other 3 teams have shown that they've been slightly stronger over the course of the season. The Ravens have also had injuries. Lamar Jackson, namely. The Saints should be above the Ravens, actually. But Lamar Jackson was the biggest injury for the Ravens, and Lamar was 8-3, or he might have been 7-3. And then I know the Ravens were 8-3 and they lost 5 in a row. But Lamar might have been 7-3, but they kind of died at the end of the season, and a lot of that was bad coaching decisions, going for a 2-point conversion instead of going to overtime in 2 games. They lost 4 games of their 5-game losing streak by 2 points or less. 2 of them being divisional games. So they've played a very strong season. They've had a really tough schedule, and finishing 8-8 with those really weird losses, not too bad. The Dolphins beat the Ravens during their winning streak. They lost terribly this past Sunday, and it's not a great look for them. They were really pushing for that playoff spot. If they had won, then they would have had really decent chances of making it, especially if they were able to beat the Patriots, because they usually beat the Patriots in Miami. But it was a tough loss to Tennessee, a team that just got A.J. Brown back, a team that's just starting to find their stride again, and they got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was really, really the wrong place for them. And moving on, we have the playoff hopefuls. These 3 teams are all currently, 2 of them are currently in playoff spots. The Raiders are not, but 2 of them will be in playoff spots next week, most likely. We have the Eagles, we have the Raiders, and we have the Chargers. For the rest of this video, is all going to be teams that are currently in the playoffs outside of the Raiders. And that's because I think that the playoff teams really should be the playoff teams this year. The other teams that didn't make the playoffs either weren't consistent the majority of the season, or they really fell off towards the end of the season. One team that really has surprised me, though, was the Raiders. I really wasn't expecting the Raiders to be making the playoffs this year, because they usually start off strong and then they start falling towards the end of the season. But they did have their usual fall off, but they recovered this year, which was something they don't usually do. This past week was one example of that, where they won a really surprising game against the Colts, who looked like one of the strongest teams in the league for the past few weeks. And then the Raiders came in and they pummeled them. They didn't pummel them, but it wasn't the best performance all season by the Colts. At 15-13, we have the Eagles and the Chargers. The Eagles didn't start off the strongest in the world, but they definitely picked it up towards the end of the season. They won a lot of important divisional games, and they were able to get a really good chance to get that wild card spot. And Jalen Hurts has really shown that he belongs in the NFL, and he is willing to do the work, and he's willing to be the guy for the Eagles. And they do look dangerous for the playoffs. I don't think that they'll make the Super Bowl, because they have Tampa, and they have Green Bay, and they have the Rams, and they have the Cardinals, and they have the Cowboys. It's a lot of teams to deal with. But I do think that they have a strong team and they have a lot of potential for next season. As for the Chargers really stayed the most consistent of like any team in the league. They stayed a game or 2 above 500 the whole season. They never looked amazing, and they never looked terrible. I guess the time they looked the most amazing was when they beat Kansas City at the beginning of the season, and then they lost the next week. So they've had their ups and downs, but they've been very consistent. They've always been in the low 10s, the low top 10, or just below the top 10 for me in my power rankings, usually between 8 and 15. And they've been really consistent this year, and they do still look like decent contenders. The Niners and the Patriots are who I have been trying real hard to look good because these two teams are trying real hard to look good. The Patriots are 10-6. They whenever they play a good team, they lose, and whenever they play a bad team, they demolish them. And the one exception to that was the Bills game, where we beat the Bills by 4 points when the wind existed. So there's basically an asterisk on all of the Patriots' quality wins. Even the win over the Browns, there's an asterisk on because the Browns haven't looked the same since then. Like either A, we broke the Browns, or B, the Browns weren't good to begin with, and we were just the first team to actually realize that. Either way, none of our wins really have been quality wins. Even the Chargers dipped off after we beat them. So like a lot of the wins that the Patriots have had haven't really been that impressive. We beat the Chargers by 3. And so even though they looked like potentially one of the best teams a couple weeks ago, we lost to the Bills and the Colts in terrible losses. And then we destroyed the Jaguars, which makes our stats look better. As for the 49ers, they started off bad. Then they went on a really big run, and then they lost a game that killed all of their momentum. And then they were losing to the Texans yesterday, and then they came back and won. They should be able to still make the playoffs, but their tiebreakers don't really look that strong. They play the Rams next week, and if the Saints beat the Panthers, then the Saints are in. So it's going to be if the Saints beat the Falcons, then the Saints are in. If the Niners lose to the Rams, so they're right on the line right now. But they've looked really strong. They have. I just don't know really what to think of them. I don't think that they're a top 10 team, but I don't think that they're much lower than 12. Our next category is teams that have beaten the Patriots. We have the Bills, the Colts, the Cowboys, and the Buccaneers. The Cardinals not included in that. Also, Bucks should be 6. Cardinals have not beaten the Patriots. The other 4 have. The Bills beat us recently. So did the Colts. I'm sorry that this is the title of this category, but I just realized it's true. The Cowboys lost this week to Arizona, which bumped them down a couple of spots. I don't have Arizona above them, though, because I expected them to lose this game. Arizona lost 3 in a row. I didn't think that they would lose 4 in a row. I thought they were too strong to do that. I was right. I do expect the Cowboys to be beating Arizona in the divisional round of the playoffs, though. The Cowboys are definitely a very strong team. They've been a little too inconsistent, and they don't have enough quality wins for me to put them at elite, though. All of the chances that they've had at quality wins recently have been against Kansas City. They lost. Against the Raiders, they lost. Against the Cardinals, they lost. Whenever there's an opportunity for the Cowboys to gain a quality win, they don't really do it. And so that's my one issue with their team. The reason why they're not lower is because the Cardinals are coming off of a 3-game losing streak, one of them being to the Lions. The Bills haven't looked consistent the entirety of the season, other than like the first 4 weeks. And the Colts just lost to the Raiders, much like the Cowboys did. The Raiders actually beat both the Colts and the Cowboys. They lost some really bad games, though. But all of these teams have looked really shaky at some point in the season, including now. Tampa got shut out by the Saints. And then this week they almost lost to the Jets, and Antonio Brown is officially gone. Antonio Brown has been one of the highlights of Tom Brady being in Tampa because Tom Brady only has 1 or 2 losses with Antonio Brown on the team. And now he's gone. Brady's favorite target, when he's available, is gone. He hasn't always been available, but he was available in the Super Bowl and 3 of the playoff games last year. The 3 that counted, not the Washington one. So I think that that's the biggest issue for Tampa is the fact that Chris Godwin is injured and Antonio Brown's gone. And I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still an elite team, but after that really close nail-biter against the Jets and then losing Antonio Brown, I had to knock them down a little bit. And then the Bills are at 10. They've played a very decent season. They have lost some weird games. They lost to Jacksonville. But overall, they've played a very solid season of football. They haven't had any remarkable wins, but they haven't had any really bad losses. And so I think that they've just kind of like stayed in that top 10. They never really did anything enough to be dropped out of the top 10. But they also really haven't done enough to be a whole lot higher than like 7, 8, 9, except for the very beginning of the season when they were playing all of the really bad teams. In the NFL's elites, we have the Packers, we have the Rams, we have the Bengals, we have the Titans, and we have the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were number one last week, and they have since been dethroned due to their loss to the Bengals. I thought that the Chiefs were going to go undefeated the rest of the season. I seriously did. They were on an 8-game winning streak. They were looking unstoppable. And then the Bengals, Joe Burrow just came in and put up 450 yards and 4 touchdowns against the hottest defense in the league. The Bengals also put up 500 yards and 4 touchdowns last week. And that was against the Ravens defense, who was another strong defense. They just put up 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns against two of the strongest defenses in the league. The Packers and the Rams have both been consistently good the whole season. The Rams had those 3 weeks where they were a little down, but since then they've recovered. They beat the Cardinals. They've been back on track recently, and they beat the Ravens this week. Titans started off strong. They lost Derrick Henry. They won a couple games without him, but then they lost their wide receivers. But now that A.J. Brown is back, they're winning games again. They just demolished the Dolphins. They're looking very strong going into the playoffs, especially if Derrick Henry comes back. Kansas City, I think Derrick Henry is coming back officially now. That also boosted them up in the rankings. Kansas City at number 5, very strong team. But this was a really unexpected loss for them. I thought that they were going to be unstoppable. And then they blew a 2-touchdown lead over the Bengals this week. They were winning 28-14. And I think that the fact that they blew a 2-touchdown lead against the playoff team is what really made me bump them down this week. The Packers have been consistently the number 1 team. I put Kansas City at number 1 last week because I thought that they were looking like the number 1 team, and then they really decided, hey, we're going to prove you wrong that we are not the number 1 team, put Green Bay back up there, so I did. But this is, I think, the first time that I've had more AFC teams than NFC teams in the NFL's elite. I seriously think that all 3 of these AFC teams are looking better than Tampa right now. And it's going to be really interesting come playoffs to see how the AFC and NFC playoff pictures unfold, because I would be surprised to see any of these teams looking on the outside looking in during the divisional round. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like. Sorry again for the late video, but I really couldn't do it yesterday. So, thanks for the support. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.